Hey squad, welcome back to another episode of Full Ride, the college recruiting podcast. This is your recruiting coach, Quito Delgado. And as always, we are powered, aka sponsored by URECRUITU. To learn more about URECRUITU and our mission, head on over to urecruitu.com. That's urecruitu.com. And I also want to encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter. It's the Playbook. It's a newsletter that comes out and it's packed with news, notes, tools, and resources to help you tackle college recruiting. Just text the word playbook. Text playbook to 66866. So text playbook to 66866. Drop us your email, and then you'll be part of the squad, and we'll send you those emails that are just packed with helpful information that's going to really help you, tackle college recruiting. And as always, I just want to invite you. If you're new to our squad, let me welcome you first and foremost. But I do want to encourage you and invite you to subscribe to our show. So, however you decide to listen to Full Ride. If it's on Apple Podcast, if it's on Spotify, Stitcher, just consider subscribing. That way you get notified every single time we drop a new episode. And then last but not least, I encourage you to, if you find value, right? This is a free resource. We're trying to keep you entertained, but also informed. So it's a free resource for you and your family. I hope you enjoy it and it helps you. But one thing you can do to help the show grow is to rank the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. So as you listen to this episode, scroll down and you're going to see a little section on your phone that says review and rank the show. Hook us up. Help us out with a quick review. Please and thank you. But yeah, I'm feeling good. I hope this finds you, however you are listening to this, wherever you are listening to this. I hope it finds you in good spirits. And then first and foremost, I hope it finds you healthy, you and your family. I know many of you are, you may be going through some things, right? Work, health, family members. Maybe you have a son or daughter. And they're missing their friends, they're missing their sports. It's okay. I mentioned this last week, but it's okay to kind of at times, just be overwhelmed by it all. Like allow yourself to accept that reality. You don't have to be Superman, Superwoman, mom and dad. It's okay to kind of look at this moment for what it is. It's a challenge. It's tough. But I do want to encourage you to, take that, that breath, inhale, exhale, recognize it. But then, dust yourself off and try to navigate it as best you possibly can. I particularly want to just before we get to today's episode, just share some words from my high school seniors out there. In social distancing and, not being able to be, with more than 10 people at once and keeping 6 feet apart. You can't go to restaurants, there's all this different stuff. I mean, it is different from, state to state. So maybe your state is open. I'm not sure. But here in upstate New York, we're finally starting to kind of reopen this week where I live. So it's about 10 weeks of me not really being able to do what I want to do. So for my student athletes out there, particularly my seniors who have, really had to endure quite a year, their last final year of high school, some of you, your sports, your season was cut short. And for many of you, you didn't even get to have a season. So I just want to share, some words with you to let you know like how proud I am of you. And I also just kind of want to remind you that, quite frankly, yes, this is not what I envisioned for you. I don't think anyone would envision this for a student who's in their last year of high school. But I do think in the long run, this is going to serve many of you well, from a standpoint of, you know, it's going to help you grow in such a way, um, big picture thinking wise. I think you're going to have more of an appreciation for the little things. I think hopefully you're going to value your schooling and your education. You're going to, really fall back in love with your sports. And just think about 10 years from now, um, or even sooner, as you start to enter the workforce. Like, this is a great story to be able to tell employers, and about how you navigate this whole process, and the lessons you learned, and how you overcame obstacles. Like, so, it's going to teach you to overcome adversity. Like, there's just so many lessons that you are going to learn through this experience, that I think is going to actually serve you very well in adulthood. Excuse me. I may not feel that way now. I understand that, but I do think big picture wise, I think our kids are going to be well equipped to tackle future adversity. And quite frankly, that has me excited for them. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. It drives my wife crazy because she may complain about something. She may, not like how certain things are going, and I'll listen to her. I'll engage, but then I do reach a point where I'm like, okay, you're done with the complaining. Let's focus on the positive, and that's kind of like where I'm at now with the coronavirus. Make no mistake about it. I have nothing but empathy, for those who have, lost income, for those who, a loved one has fallen severely ill, or worse, has perished. Don't get it twisted. Like, I am fully aware of that. I'm fully empathetic. My heart aches for those families. But at the same time, I'm also at that point where, okay, guys, like, we also got to look at the positives in the situation too. And there are, believe it or not, a number of positives that are going to come out of this. So I think we also got to be grateful for those as well. But that's just my take. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying if you're wrong if you feel differently, but that's just kind of how I feel. But ultimately, I do think our young students, many of them are going to come out of this stronger than ever before. I have confidence in them because our kids can persevere. So just kind of wanted to share that. I have a great guest joining me today. Her name is Morgan Jones. She's a former college athlete, and she drops a lot of value on this week's episode of Full Ride. And before we get to her, lastly, just want to encourage you to follow us on social media. Let's connect. Let's stay connected throughout the week. So first, sign up for our newsletter, The Playbook. Text 66866 to join the Playbook. But then also follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and it's all URECRUITU, one word, the letter U, the word recruit, the letter U. So URECRUITU. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter. Say hi to us. Slide us a DM. I'm always responding in the direct messages. And but that's all I got. Let's get into this week's episode. I hope you enjoy. Morgan, how we doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm hanging. Just making the best out of a pretty crazy situation. I guess the most important thing: are you safe? Are you healthy?
I'm safe and I'm healthy and I'm choosing to be fantastic.
I love that. I gotta say, right off the bat, I have really come to love your starting five. When you go live on Instagram, and we'll get to your handle in a little bit, but I love that you're going live with like your starting five, your close circle of family, and you're interviewing one another right on Instagram Live. That's pretty cool. What made you think to do that?
Really, it just came about because we're all quarantined together right now. I'm from Virginia. My fiance live in Virginia, our family. And so we came down to Florida and, got a house and we all just came together. And so we've been hanging and cooking and hanging out and, just realizing that we all have a lot of knowledge and wisdom to give other people. And so we were like, what can we do? And I said, well, let me start something on Instagram where I'm interviewing you guys. And that's how we can serve and provide hope and information. Because right now everyone's hanging out on social media trying to look for, a release from just being cooped up in the house. So why not provide them with some valuable information?
That's awesome. As a matter of fact, I checked it out a couple of days yesterday. I think I say a couple of days ago, but it was like literally yesterday.
Yeah.
But I was able to hop on with you and your fiance, and that was really knowledgeable. You guys talk about college recruiting. So in that vein, let's talk about college recruiting. So why don't you take a moment and officially introduce yourself to our listeners? Let them know the sport you played in college, and of course, what college you went to, and then what you're doing today, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Morgan Jones. I am the founder and creator of Athletes to Visionaries and sports broadcaster. With Athletes to Visionaries, what we do is we help athletes define who they are and embrace who they are beyond their label athlete. Myself, I played at Florida State University and professional basketball in Puerto Rico, and knowing how difficult that transition was for me in redefining who I was made me start and create that. And so I do it for female student athletes.
No, I love that. I love that mission. And we'll definitely get into it a little bit later. But before we get to that, so you went to Florida State. That's clearly a Power 5, major Division I basketball. So can you just describe what was your recruiting process like? I mean, would you have a number of offers? I'm assuming you weren't an under the radar recruit like many student athletes out there today.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a pretty highly recruited athlete. In my sophomore year of high school, I was a top 20 player in the country. I was number 19 to be exact. I made a goal for myself that I wanted to be a top 10 player by the time I was done with high school. And I worked really hard to do that and got it by my junior year. I can remember my dad calling me into the room where he used to watch all and read all like the blogs about women's basketball and what was going on and stuff. And he called me into the room. He said, "Look, Morgan." And I looked at the list and it said number 9. So I had just scratched the surface of my goal and finished off my high school career as the number 9th player in the country. I believe I was second in my position. And as you know, with that comes a lot of attention from college coaches, field games with college coaches lined up. So I have a lot of offers were on my plate. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Well, I just love the fact that you made it. You had a very specific goal. You didn't say, I want to be one of, the top players in the country. I want to be top 10. So not only did you say top 10, but you also said by the end of your junior or your senior, you said?
End of junior year.
End of your junior year, you want it. So not only was it really, laser focused, but then you actually put a timeline on it. So I'll let you touch on this. What is, the importance of talking of setting goals for yourself as a young student athlete? I think a lot of times we tell them to practice and do all this different stuff, but we really don't talk about goal setting. So can you just talk about the importance of that?
Gosh, goals are so important, and they're the best, like one of the best things you can learn early on because you'll need them throughout your whole entire life. Right now, even with what we're in right now with being quarantined and COVID-19, it right now is the time to really set goals and say, by the time this lockout or lock-in, if you will, is done, what do I want to have accomplished? You have to have direction, you have to have vision, you have to have a path you're trying to go on and something you're trying to achieve always. So with that, the importance of setting goals, for my mom had always taught me early on. We would sit down at New Year's, right, when we're switching New Year's, and we set the goals for the year. Where do you want to be? Where are you at now? What's the measurement we can put on it? And I think they're very, very important. So any parents and coaches that are listening, I really encourage you to sit down with your athletes and help them really make measurable goals, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very important to evaluate where you are at and make realistic goals of where you're trying to go. And in doing that, every goal you make needs to have a measurement, a time, a date you're trying to reach that by. And anytime, I think what the people kind of get discouraged about with goals is, okay, well, what if I don't reach it? Did I fail? No, you didn't fail. That means you just have to pivot. You have to relook at that goal and say, okay, given where I am now how do I move forward? And so back to your point of setting goals, I'm a huge advocate for it.
No, I think that's just great advice. I wasn't really planning on talking about goal setting, but it's important. And you touched it. You made a great point saying, particularly now, like we have I'm going to say life isn't paused. I mean, we're still living, we're still doing stuff every day, but things are different. So now is the actual perfect time for a young student athlete to sit down and really reflect on, okay, where do you want to be a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now? And then mom and dad, you can make this a nice activity and do it together. And I would just encourage you to not just do it, start, say 3 months from now, but then back it into months, back it into weekly, daily goals so you can make it really manageable. So your recruiting process, again, is probably a lot different than the majority of our listeners, which is totally fine. But I'm sure there were some, pitfalls you may have hit along the way, or even if you personally didn't hit along the way, you may have observed others coming up against this. So what were some of the lessons that you learned as a high school recruit going through this process that you think other families need to be aware of?
Yeah, and you're exactly right in that my process was the point, 1.5% of athletes being recruited. I mean, my process was not extremely relatable to every athlete. However, I am still in the space of knowing what really goes into the athletic process, the athletic journey. I've had a sister who's played D3. She also played D1. I was able to watch her. I've had tons of teammates that have gone low Division I, D2, D3. And I'm still in that conversation, like, with my fiance being a college coach. So I'm still very familiar with everything. But to give specific advice to athletes on their journey in their recruiting process, wow, you can go so many ways with this, but I would really, really say, like, it's your process. So your process is not going to be the same as your teammates' process. Your journey is not going to be the same as, the point guard's journey. And you have to be okay with that. So really it's evaluating like yourself and where you're at. And the moment that you really start to realize, like, I am my greatest competition, and like every time you step out on the court, you're trying to be your best and you're trying to essentially beat yourself, not everyone else. And that is something that no matter what level you go to, and even after sport, will really benefit you in life, to be a winner in life. And so, I mean, if you want to say specifically, you can ask me about that specific type of athlete. But in general, everyone's process is different, and the biggest thing is don't look to your left or right. You got to really show up and just get better.
No, I think that is. Ooh, I love that advice. I'm actually writing it down. That's why if people are watching, I'm writing, not because I'm being rude. I'm writing down these notes, and I always encourage our listeners to write down notes along the way. But 2 points that you made is different for everyone. I think a lot of, not even just the student athletes, but parents make that mistake, right? You definitely want to get some advice from people, but the moment you start getting advice from someone, well, maybe they have a son or a daughter that's a year older than your kid. They just went through it. Their kid they got a full ride or a partial scholarship to a Division II school. But it could be a totally different sport. You guys can have different goals. You can have different grades, different abilities, all these different things. And, when you start, saying, oh, well, it worked for them, it's going to work for me, that's definitely a big mistake. So, it's different for everybody, but then also I love that you said, you're in competition with yourself. I haven't heard that one. I always actually say, your competition is across the nation, not just, but you actually break it down even further. Like, no, it's with yourself, and beat yourself and be your absolute best. So I love that you shared that. So now though, let's transition, because we do have families who student athletes are going off to college. They signed a national letter of intent. We're really happy for them. You were going into Florida State as a top 10 recruit in the nation. So when you hit campus, was there an adjustment period, or did you come right off the bat just balling, dominating? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, initially, I went out of high school. I went to Northwestern University in Chicago, which is in the Big Ten. So that's where I actually started my college career. I was a McDonald's All-American, and I played for the USA Olympics in high school. So I could have had opportunities to go really anywhere. I chose to go to Northwestern because my sister was there. So me and her got to play a year of college together, as well as it's a great academic institution. So that was a big push for my parents to like get me a very good education out of this. Rightfully so, makes sense. And I also really wanted to go somewhere where I could actually contribute and take a program from maybe not that great of a winning program, if you will, to a really good program. So I believed in Northwestern at the time, and that's where I ended up going. And a lot of people looked at me like I was crazy, or were like, "Why did you go there? Where's Northwestern?" So I took a lot of hits for that because, you could have went anywhere. But at the end, I got to Northwestern, and I'm not going to say I was the best player on the team, because there were girls there that were older than me that were very good. I mean, I was surrounded by pretty good players. However, I don't feel like I was challenged in my game enough, and I knew that like my potential as a player potentially would not have been met there. And in addition, in the recruiting process, I was promised and told a lot of things that didn't really happen. And so at the end of that season, I played the most minutes on the team. I took the most shots, but I still ended up leaving because I felt as though that wasn't the right school for me and like who I am and what I wanted out of it. So when I transitioned, or I went to go transfer, I visited LSU, I visited Kentucky, and I visited Florida State. And I picked Florida State because it was in my home state, Florida, and my parents and family could come, as well as there was an assistant coach there, Coach Ronald Huey, that had been recruiting me since I was in 8th grade. And so I kind of felt that trust. Florida State in general had been recruiting me since I was really young. And so I decided to go to Florida State, and I really have no regrets in terms of like being a student athlete there and really and truly experiencing a college experience. And that's one thing that I knew I wanted to have when I left, is like, I want to enjoy these 4 years for what they are. And hindsight, that I'm very happy because that's what they are. I mean, they are a quick 4 years. They come and they go fast. And when you're in it, you think the world revolves around you and this is the all end be all. But the reality is it's a very short time, and the relationships that you build, the education that you get, and the resources that you maximize are going to be key.
No, absolutely. And so you did transfer. Like, I didn't realize that part about your history. So what would you recommend them, the student athlete? I think clearly you had to, you went there mainly, I feel like, obviously the education, but a big part of it was that sister dynamic. I want to be with my sister, want to be close. We can rock this out for a year. In hindsight, but then along the way, though, you kind of maybe ignore the fact that this might not be a good fit, on the court. So what advice, though, would you give to the student athletes as far as putting together a criteria? What should, I mean, it's different for everybody, but are there some, building blocks that you would recommend that, if you were to build out a list of factors that you want to evaluate in a school, can you kind of break down or recommend, what are some really key things that people need to look into so that they don't miss some potential red flags?
Yeah. Well, first, what I will say is that, because for the parents, the coaches, the athletes that are listening, is that if you have and you're afforded the opportunity to choose a school, and you have numerous schools, it definitely has to be your decision. Like, I can't stress that enough, in that this is a time to start making big girl, big boy decisions about your life. And you have to make that decision of where you're going to go, because when you get on that campus, you're going to be the one going to class. You're going to be the one in practice. You're going to be the one sore. You're going to be the one getting yelled at. You really have to make it your decision, because if it goes right or it goes wrong, you have to deal with that. And it's really like the first one you make transitioning from high school to college in terms of starting to step into your own. So that's first and foremost. Parents will argue, well, I know what's better for my kid and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not telling you not to help them, not to guide them, But when it comes down to, okay, we going to, Northern Illinois, or we going to Wichita State, that's your child's decision, But in terms of actually the things to look for in a school, hindsight, I would definitely say the location is very important. And not just because like, oh, I want to go to school on the beach, or, I want to go just because I like this city, but really thinking about what that city could afford you when you're done. So I always say, like, you going to play, or you have an opportunity to go to a big school in the middle of nowhere, or you can go to University of Illinois, Chicago, and be downtown Chicago, surrounded by those resources and culture and life and opportunity. What are you going to do? So the resources the location's very important, the resources that the school provides you. And I wouldn't even say the coaches, because the coaches can change.
Can you say that again, please?
I wouldn't even say school because the coaches can change.
I wouldn't all the time.
Yeah, you really can't. Like, I mean, you really just can't rely on the coaches. And also understanding that the coach's job is really to get you there so that you can perform on the court, on the field. When they're recruiting you, you build a very personal relationship, but when you get there, it's business. And so don't get that confused. It needs to be business from the beginning, right?
So why don't you just touch on then the difference between, when you're being recruited, the coach, the experiences that you have with your coach during recruiting versus once you're on campus and now you're actually a collegiate athlete.
Yeah, definitely. When you are being recruited, you are being recruited. I mean, in the sense that, so the head coach's job, if you look at it in like a really simple, practical form, is that the head coach's job is to win basketball games, right? The university hires them to win basketball games. So in winning basketball games, they need the best players to be able to help them win basketball games. So in the recruiting process, when they're recruiting you, they're doing everything to get you to like them so that you come to their school to then help them win games. So it almost like the same thing needs to be the other way in terms of athletes really taking control of their process by having and knowing what you want out of a school and what you're looking for and asking the right questions. That's very important because you might really like the coach, but you get there and they turn into someone totally different, or they're not aligned like you thought they would, or you fell in love with the coach so much, and then when the coach now wants to talk real business, you don't like that side of them. So that's why you see so many transfers, you see so many moving parts to things being done, or athletes feeling like they've been mistreated, is because there hasn't been complete transparency between both parties, and athletes get to schools and the thing that they were promised wasn't delivered.
Yeah. Like, wait, but you said I was going to have this jersey number. You said I was going to start. You said, it was like,
no, my sister and I at Northwestern, told us, we would be on buses because we're sisters. They would brand that together. They said we both could have our last names on the back of our jerseys, like M. Jones and T. Jones, and just little fun stuff like that. None of that happened when I arrived. They said we would be playing together. I got to the school, and my sister, she didn't play as much. She was actually starting before I got there, and when I got there, she ended up losing minutes, and so it just wasn't what they said, right?
You told me you took your sister's spot.
We don't even play the same position,
okay,
right?
okay,
But they literally had it was tough. It was a tough situation that us as a family went through. But it's also a testament, just the fact that you really have to do what's best for you. And so athletes that are thinking about transferring or whatever, yes, stick it out, but you also have to do what's best for you, which goes back to the initial point, which is goals. What are your goals? And your goals have to be more than just scoring this many points or trying to get this many athletic accolades, because you can't control that necessarily. The biggest thing about going to college, right, is to get an education and utilize the education to further yourself and your career. So what does that look like?
I love that answer. So now why don't we just kind of pivot to our current college athletes, and what advice would you give to them to help them maximize their total college experience, both inside and outside the classroom, both on and off the court or field of play?
Back to what we originally talked about, which is like, what are your goals? And they have to be like holistic goals. So not just, again, what you're doing on the court, but like, what do you want to do career-wise? Where are you at spiritually? What type of connections do you want to make? I think the more athletes can really tap into the resources and be intentional about what they're doing, the better they'll get a return on their time at their university. Intentionality is very important, and that it's something that when you're in college, you kind of just go with the flow. You're still being told when to go to practice, when to eat, school and all that stuff. You're in new social environments. It's the first time you're away from home to the point where you can make those type of decisions. So you kind of just go with the flow, if you will. And it's really the time to be intentional about, what you want to achieve while you're in college, whether that's that year, that semester, or however you want to break it down. So again, goals. What are your goals? Being intentional. And then the third one I would say are relationships. The number one thing you're going to take from college, no matter what, are the relationships that you build and you manifest. So you have to be very, I don't want to use the word intentional again, but you have to take care of the relationships that you come across in college, because you never know when you'll come across that person in the future or ever need someone. So you never want to burn bridges. And I think that's the biggest thing. Because when I was at Florida State, I actually did burn bridges. Not everything went smooth, and I had to go back and kind of put the pieces back together and right my wrongs in some ways. And now those relationships are back to where they were. But, I realized when I left college, I'm like, what did that serve me to do? Like, why did I do that? And I'm the one that's suffering from it. Their lives continue to go on. So again, no matter what, take care of your relationships, set goals, and be intentional about how you move and what you do on that campus.
Now, I think that's really sound advice. Like, I just know for me, just outside of the field of play, I really dropped the ball when it came to just networking. And I was at Northeastern. We had a great co-op program. So you had a chance to do internships. And rather than me really, and this is no knock on like Enterprise Rent-A-Car, but I worked at like Enterprise Rent-A-Car, in the field. I had no interest in long-term, again, nothing wrong with the Enterprise. Serves a fine company. But like, I just kind of like took it because it was close to campus and, they paid decent. But I had no real desire to really go into that industry. Or, another year I was working in our registrar's office, handing out transcripts, when kids came in to request them. So my point was, the school that I went to had this amazing internship program, and I really took no advantage of it. So, I really think that what you said about building your network while on campus, I think that is great advice for our current college athletes. So, Morgan,
and I think too that they're at the point too, like any athletes that are listening or parents and coaches and trying to help their athlete understand how to maximize that time that they're in college. Is also that these boosters, these alumni, the people that are hired to work there, when you're an active athlete, they truly want to help you. Like more than the 2 years after you leave. Like, when you're an active athlete, you have all the leverage. And so that is the time to, like you said, go to those different events that they hold and shake people's hands and kind of, introduce who you are to them. Those are very important to make those type of connections and really, because they already know what you do, but how can you show people who you are? And that's really important, because nobody will remember, again, like how many points you scored, stuff like that. They're going to remember how you feel in those interactions. So even from your classmates and how you interact with them on group projects, from your teachers, that are you sitting in the front of the class, or are you giving them a hard time and sit in the back of the class? All of those things matter, and they go into who you are and ultimately your brand.
Boom. And again, you keep dropping nuggets where you were saying about, your leverage. The moment you are no longer eligible to play, the moment you no longer, deliver value in the forms of wins and losses or, to the university in some capacity, like it's gone. And you can't rewind time and get it back. So like while you are a member of the team, like people love having access to current college athletes. And again, I'm not saying do anything illegal or anything like that, but what I'm saying is you can literally call members of the alumni network and just say, hey, I'm a current athlete and I would love to connect with you, leverage LinkedIn, reach out to them. You have all these different tools at your disposal. And I just don't want you to wait until like it's your last semester of your senior year to get focused in on building your relationship. No, from the day one, build relationships with professors on campus, with academic advisors, with alumni who have gone. Like there's just so many opportunities for you to do that. So I'm glad that you kind of added to that. So now let's talk about what you're doing today. So what prompted you to start your organization and just tell us more about what you guys are doing through athletes. Was it Athletes to Visionaries?
Yeah. So Athletes to Visionaries is an organization. It's designed for female student athletes to help them see themselves beyond the game and beyond that label athlete through self-love, self-belief, personal development. So in my journey, when I was an athlete, a lot is focused on wins and losses and how can you become stronger, better, more competitive. And there was a real missing piece for me, which is someone to help me through the personal side of things of like self-belief and self-love and relationships and things like that. Really having no idea who I was beyond the game because my identity was always fed based on my performances on the court. And so when I transitioned out of sport, playing professionally, I got to a point where I had no idea who I was. I was working like a corporate job in sales and was sleeping on my mom's couch, Uber driving on the side, partying, drinking, smoking, just doing everything that you would think a top Division I athlete wouldn't do. That I think there's this idea that, we're so taken care of during those 4 years that we got it, right? Like the athlete in us, like, we got it. We'll transition now. We'll figure it out. Well, no one really prepares you necessarily for life that comes next. You really don't understand how well and good you have it. So for me, that's where the root of it started. And I really think, it's great to have a job. I got a job. That was cool. I still wasn't fulfilled. I had a boyfriend. Okay. That was cool. That still didn't lead me to really being passionate and finding my purpose. And so that's what I want to help female athletes, female student athletes really start to discover and embrace is who they truly are so that then they can navigate life on that term instead of other people's terms.
And now where can, I think that's an amazing, mission that you're on. And again, I feel like we're really relatable, but it's not unique to us. Quite frankly, I think from a very young age, let's just say the average kid starts playing, and I'm going to do it for easy math purposes at the age of 10. And I know it's earlier than that for most of these kids, but for easy math, we'll say 10. And now you play from 10, and let's say you're fortunate enough to play in college. So now let's just say 5 years, because some kids go to 4, but let's just say 5 years. At minimum, you're looking at let's say you graduate and you're 23. At minimum, and this is on the low end, a 13-year career, of sports. Now in your situation, you went and turned pro.
Right.
And now if you really, but let's say 13 years of, consistent playing that particular sport for a 13-year period. And now, not out of nowhere, but now that is gone. You have a big void that's just no longer there. And he's like, what do I do next? You've tied your entire identity to that sport. So a lot of students, a lot of athletes, just say, struggle transitioning, and whether it's at the end of high school, whether it's at the end of college, or when it's at the end of a professional career. So I just really admire what you're doing for our female athletes. So where can our listeners, if they want to learn more, where could they find athletes to visionaries?
Yeah, so you can find myself at Morgan Jones _MJ, and then you can find Athletes to Visionaries at Athletes to Visionaries. If you go to my page, then it'll have a link there to go to the other page. And yeah, so it's been a really, really awesome journey, and you're exactly right in that we're not unique in this, and anything that you put you're all into can lead to this type of identity crisis. But it's ultimately seeing yourself as, how does God see me, right? That's your real identity. And so just kind of guiding people to that, and then that ultimately leads to passion and purpose. And I'm only saying this because I've walked through it. And so I just want that for everyone else. So it's creating an intentional spaces to have these type of conversations early on for athletes, and helping them get some direction.
No, I love that. I think it's powerful what you're doing. If I can be of help in any way, please don't hesitate to connect with me. But now we always have a parting shot, for our student athletes and their parents. We call it a winning play. But before we get to that, I do want to just again remind our listeners that we're talking to Morgan Jones, former college athlete, actually we haven't even gotten to it, but pro athlete. Just real quick before we get to the end and the winning play, can you talk about where did you play overseas? How was that experience like?
I played in Puerto Rico. Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was a really great experience in terms of just location and new culture and things like that. It was a reality that you had to face, and you're like, okay, I've made it to the professional level. Here I am, everyone, look at me, because it was something that people, told me since I was a little girl, right? Like when I started getting good, it was like, oh, you can go play professional. You can be professional. Everyone was like, that's what you should do. That's the path you're on. And they shaped me into thinking that was the ultimate destination. And so when getting there, being a pro, now looking around like, okay, so this is what a pro's like. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I got paid decent money. I did. Financially, it was good money. But you're living away from your family. I was living in I don't want to say a garage, but I didn't have any windows. I practiced one time a day at 7:00. Besides that, you had the whole day to do whatever you want. No one speaks your language. Puerto Rico, a lot of people spoke Spanish. If you could picture what our locker room was like, I want you to think of the Love and Basketball movie when Monica was in the locker room and the coach was telling everyone the game plan, and then the girl came over and said, this is the game plan, had to break it down to her in English. That's exactly how it was. Yeah, so that's a perfect picture of what it's like. And so I just knew that wasn't going to be for me, because I was a little bit over the fact of, I love you when you're doing great, I hate you when you're not. And I still experienced that at the pro level, and that became very exhausting. It was no longer fun. And that was a decision that I had to make, to transition out of sports completely. But I was ready to kind of see, what was next for myself.
So now how long did you play professionally?
I only played 4 months. So my season was very short. I picked a short season specifically to explore what professional basketball was for me or not. And so I played 4 months, so I didn't play very long.
Wow. I'm assuming though that probably may have played a role in, how hard it was for you to transition, because you're only into that 4 months. You probably didn't really think that it was going to end that quick, but I think you just realized, I've had it. I've had enough. I'm away from my family. It's like you're close to your family. You're away from your family. So that's a.
And parents and coaches that are listening, I mean, what to always remember is try to keep it fun for these kids as long as you can, truly fun, because when you get to college, it's fun, yes, but it's also a business, and those things that became fun, just going out there and playing and laughing and joking and stuff, it becomes a lot slimmer. And so by the time you get to the pro level, it's that doesn't exist. And so just try to allow your kids to have fun as long as they can in doing their sport.
No, I think that's awesome advice. Again, now for the closing, again, I'm glad we snuck that in. Talking with Morgan Jones. If you want to get to, continue to follow Morgan, continue to follow athletes to visionaries, the best place to find Morgan is on Instagram. It is Morgan Jones _MJ. Morgan Jones _MJ. And Morgan, I really appreciate you hopping on. It's been awesome. Why don't you give our families, particularly our student athletes, a winning play that's going to help them take control of their college recruiting process?
If you want practicality, and I think that's what people are dying for, and I would love to leave you guys with some practical information, which is film your games and put together highlight tapes of yourself. That's the only way, no matter what level you're at, or if you're not being recruited, which is majority of athletes, that's the only way it's going to get in front of college coaches for them to be able to see you, especially those low those low D2, D3 schools. They don't have the budgets to fly all over the country. So again, major key is film some of your games, make a highlight tape, and send it out.
So don't just make the highlight tape, but then you got to make it and then you got to send it out.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. You can't just put on YouTube and think it's going to magically show up, at someone's inbox, but definitely send it out to the schools that you want to go to, use thoughtful text and sending it to them and do that consistently. So your freshman year, sophomore year, your junior year, your senior year, show the progression of your stats, the progression of your game. That's how you take ownership of your athletic recruiting journey.
Boom. I love it, Morgan. I appreciate it. And again, families who are listening, I know you're going to find value in this episode, or you have found value in this episode. So please, as always, be a good teammate. Give that assist and share this episode with your teammates, with other families, with coaches, players. Let's educate and, be in this process together. But until next time, this is your recruiting coach, Quito Delgado, reminding you that college recruiting starts with you. What steps are you taking today to earn an athletic scholarship tomorrow?